So I love growing tomatoes. I love nightshades, and nightshades are all tomatoes, peppers, potatoes, eggplant. You can see they share the same leaf pattern, similar growing habits. They branch and they have similar growing behaviors, if you'll say. They're more geared toward understory plants. So that's why you see them suffer in the heat of the summer. You'll see some of the foliage die back, especially lower on the plant. And you'll see a lot less blossoms setting when you get past 90, 95 degrees. So this is a few varieties we have. This would be a solar flare. This is a sweet cream. This is one from Wild Boar Farms. I can't remember that one. It's just a really tiny cherry tomato. And then back there we have an Arbison that we brought. So I like doing different styles. I like having a beefsteak. I like having some soft slicers. I like having some I can make sauce with, some I can roast. I'm making salsa, pizza, pasta sauce. So I want a common denominator. I could be a little hybridized in my cooking. And it's also very aesthetically pleasing to have different colors. And then this purple one, I don't know what the variety it is. I traded that one, a plant at the Del Oro plant sale. If you have a chance to go to the Del Oro plant sale, they do one every spring. I think it was in April this year. You were working an event the same day I was working that event. So I was selling honey and selling tomato plants, and we grow our tomatoes from seed. And then we have a greenhouse. So we started the first round the last week of January, and then about middle of February is when we stopped planting seeds.
Where is Del Oro? Are you talking about the tennis club?
The high school. It's in the foothills, I believe, up kind of Loomis direction. But they're very 4-H farm agriculture driven up there. And they had probably 70 or 80 varieties of tomatoes out there. It was pouring rain and the kids were still out there. So we found some good ones. And they do a lot of perennials, a lot of succulents. So the kids kind of group up over there. You get some like minds. And if you're interested in learning, places like Del Oro are awesome. Fair Oaks Community Garden is a good place to get plugged in. And you could also put to use in the real world some stuff that you're researching. If you saw a YouTube video, I call it YouTube University. There's good and bad and ugly information on there. So if you can kind of glean that and get an idea of what direction you want to go with things, it's really easy with this group and other local areas to partner and see what works well for you. So talk a little bit about tomato varieties and selection. It's entirely dependent on your palate. What do you want? You want sauce? You want stuff for BLTs? Do you want burgers? So whatever you want to grow, and also think about what keeps well on the counter. The bigger the tomato gets, generally the skin gets a little bit thinner quicker. And the fruit doesn't ripen all at once because the flower's got different segments. So when it gets pollinated, part of the segment of the fruit might mature a little bit quicker. And you'll notice that on the big tomatoes. You'll have a hard green edge on one and the other end's already rotting. And generally you'll see that occur the higher the temperatures go, because that ripening process starts to accelerate. And if it's just too big, it misses that window. But you can always cut it off, throw it to compost to the chickens, and then eat the good part. Preparing for planting, we're going to do a series of classes this fall and winter, so I'm not going to get too into the weeds on growing and planting, but tomatoes are very heavy nitrogen users right in the beginning. They put off a lot of vegetative growth. And so I like to use horse manure and worm castings. If you're using chicken manure, I like to get it in the fall, let it sit out in the rain, and then in the spring, it's great to plant in. Tomatoes don't do too well with a hot nitrogen, but if it's already composted and broke it down, they'll use it pretty quickly. Because they're an understory plant, they're not designed to grow like sunflowers and outcompete everything. What they're going to do is to kind of start climbing and get a few fruits up there. And all they want to do is make a seed. They don't care about feeding you. Once they start making that one seed and you let it ripen, the rest of the tomato thinks, okay, I kind of did my job. So sometimes, and if you have two plants of the same variety, try and leave one to let it ripen on the plant, and the other ones pick them as they start to blush. You'll notice a point where the flavor is not really going to increase on your pick, but the sooner you can get them off the plant, the quicker that plant is not diverting energy to that and water, and it focus on the other ones. Peppers mainly benefit from that more than tomatoes, so I try and do a clear harvest. So preparing for planting, how many plants are you going to have? What size area are you going to use? Are you going to grow in cages? Are you going to grow in trellises? Are you going to let them run wild? Or do you already have something existing that you could accoutrement? You have fruit trees, or people have arbors or balconies. Cultivation and best practices. We like to follow an integrated pest management system, and we'll get more into that in our classes in the fall. But it's going to deal with diseases, irrigation, pests, pruning, and soil maintenance and composition. Managing pests. In this area right now, we've got a pretty high pressure of yellow jackets, and they seem to be cleaning up a lot of the caterpillars and a lot of the smaller beetles in the nymph stage. And they also take out some honeybees as well. Diseases happen from overwatering for the most part. Tomatoes are fairly drought tolerant. The problem comes when people are getting them interplanted with other things that have a much higher water need. And it's like trying to feed a toddler and adult at the same time. One's going to be overfed or one's going to be hungry still, and it's hard to maintain them on that. And we'll go into irrigation a little bit down the road. And it looks pretty to have a red tomato and a blue tomato and a white tomato and this tomato and that tomato. But just get them all in one block and segregate them, because that'll also segregate your needs. Yes, sir.
Can I have you hit on that child thing? Like, because in Italy, they feed or water the tomato plant and then they harvest it back. And so when they talk about companion planting, like basil and whatnot, which needs the water, could you just do a brush cut on that?
I put potatoes under my tomatoes. I put onions underneath there. I do basil, blue basil, and melons do really well. Because when we grow, I'll show you the trellis picture in a bit, we grow the tomatoes up on a trellis and we start cleaning up the foliage from the bottom up. So we allow a lot of light penetration and air through the bottom. Yeah, basically lollipopping them. So you have lollipop stem and then plant on top.
Blake, have you seen much of the leaf-footed beetles? We've noticed a lot of them on our tomatoes, and
The big ones?
well, there's the little nibs, which are red, and I see it asked like every day on the Facebook groups. I know a lot of people are seeing them, and a lot of people haven't seen them much before. But I'm really noticing that my tomatoes have just all these spots on them, which is unusual. I think that's what they do.
Yeah, and they'll also transport viruses that way. So that's a big vector for viruses to get into your tomato plants and other fruit.
I don't like them, not at all.
No.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
And you can mitigate that by hanging bird socks with bird seed. The more birds you get running through the area, they're going to take care of more of the bugs. If you're seeing any
particular birds, by the way, like native songbirds, are we talking about?
I would do some research on your native birds and try and cater to those instead of something that might be a little more invasive, depending on where you live. I live right by the river, so we've got pressure from all sorts of animals, fox, coyote, and then we have bats and owls at night. So that, rats will take out tomatoes as well. They'll climb up there and chew them off. I'm sure you guys have come out to see that. So
At the Orangeville Community Garden, it seems like the people that have left their tomatoes the longest are the ones that are hit the hardest by the leaf bugs.
they're more attractive. They have more time to be
Yeah,
out there, and then they get
it's
tastier and tastier.
Yeah.
And bugs know what colors mean on plants. If a bug flies by and sees yellow leaves, the bug is inclined to lay eggs and attack that pest or that plant as opposed to a big green plant. And it's like a predator in a herd. Go after the weak one. They have more likelihood of going in and having success on that plant.
See this under the bugs, but that's sad. Yeah.
And then tomatoes have a lot of trichomes on the stems. You rub the stems and smell your fingers. That's a deterrent to a lot of herbivores and some animals. This time of year, the deer don't seem to care. They still kind of nip at whatever they can get their hands on.
And they still like the tomatoes.
Yeah, they're going for water. They're not going to eat for food. They're going for the water content of the tomatoes. And you can really notice that if you take a walk at the river and you see, oh, there's still daisies. And you take 2 weeks later, daisies are dead. And you're like, okay, so it's a little bit less food. So the food at the table gets a little bit smaller to the point where that pressure is going to spill into your garden. Because your garden looks great. You're fertilizing, you're watering it, you're pruning it. You're just ringing the dinner bell.
Home Depot 5-gallon buckets full of water are a godsend to a garden. Like, no joke. I keep 25 of those things all over my setting.
Deer run up, they get their fill of water, and they don't have to keep cranking. Yeah, you can do a sacrifice.
There's ponds in my
really-
backyard. That's true. Yeah.
You're next to the watering hole. You're the burger joint next to the bar. Just walk next door.
They got my yard for the first time after 20 years, and I had a trellis with 40 tomato plants on it, and they ate almost all of them.
Yep, they clean house.
One day. And I have her yard now that I walled it off.
Can't beat them. So harvesting and storage and enjoying your tomatoes. Cherry tomatoes stack well, so you see them at the store. Cherry tomatoes are always stacked in little bins, like 3 inches by 3 inches by 4 inches. And usually it's like 12 ounces or a pound that fit in there. Once you start stacking bigger tomatoes, the weight starts pushing down on themselves. So unless you have a really firm variety or you pick them really early, and you'll notice when you try some tomatoes back there, some will seem really soft and they're kind of falling apart, melting almost. And other ones have a little more body, almost like you're biting into an apple. It's just not quite as hard, but to make a comparison. So some of them hold up a little bit better in storage. I can leave some of the big tomatoes on the counter for 3 days and they start leaking. as opposed to some of the smaller beefsteak arbusson. And the arbusson will stay on the counter for 3 weeks. And I can cut them open and they're fine. They're just a little bit soft, but they're perfect. So depending on your storage needs, I don't like to store tomatoes in the refrigerator. I like room temperature storage. And then the space you're going to have to storage. Are you going to be processing? Are you going to be doing a pressure canner? Do you have jars to sterilize? Do you have a clean work area? You have all your utensils set? You have enough jars? You have enough lids? You have enough bands? So whatever you plan on doing on the back end, whether it's a space for your dehydrator to go, just plan ahead on where that's going to go, because we all know how fast the garden starts kicking out, right, when you start getting busy in the summertime. So these are the sun sugars. They're the orange-colored cherry tomatoes on the table back there. And I like them better than the sun golds because they don't split as much. So the sun sugars are a little bit smaller than the sun golds, but they have a little bit higher Brix content, so a little bit higher sugar content in there. And when they split, they don't mold as easy. They start to just dehydrate. And sometimes you'll find them dehydrate on the stem. It's just a lovely treat. And this is called the Florida weave. So what we've done is we've taken the row of our plant that we're going to take, we put T-posts in the ground. And the T-posts that go on the end of the row, they're at a really steep angle. So we drive those in really, really wide, almost 45 degrees sometimes. All depends on how much weight we want that to carry. And then every post in the middle is going to be upright. And depending on how big the plants are, I can fit 6 cherry tomato plants between posts on a 6-foot run. But if I'm growing big tomatoes, I'm going to need to do 4, maybe even 3 plants spread out between posts. And you can space your plants the same width. You just need to put more T-posts in there to account for how much weight those are going to be having on there.
Can you say those numbers again?
For cherry tomatoes, I would do about 6 plants between your posts at whatever distance you want to do.
What's the post space?
Whatever you'd like.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So it's up to your discretion.
Yeah, if these were bigger tomatoes, I'd have another post here instead of just here and down at the end there. So if these were bigger, larger tomatoes, I'd have more support in there. And then when we run the line goes in front of a trunk, or in front of a stem and behind a stem, in front of a stem and behind a stem. And we snake it all the way down. And when we get to the end, we come back the same way. We go back behind. So by the time we've completed a back and forth run on one level, we've now supported the plant from both sides. And by going back and forth, it's a very similar concept when you're staking a new tree. When you put a tree in the ground, you don't want to have the one tree stake and then the plant ties, because that tree is going to grow and it's going to girdle the stem. So you put 2 posts, you put the tree in the middle, and you wrap one end this way and you wrap the other end this way. So at no point is there ever anything wrapped all the way around the trunk. One just goes from this tree stake around the trunk, the other one goes from this tree stake out the trunk. That allows the stems some leeway to move with the wind, or if they get bumped. If you trip and fall and bump it, it's not going to break everything down. And it also allows these stalks to grow and get larger in circumference. As they grow, it'll distribute the weight across the entire run. And if you've ever grown in tomato cages, it gets to the top of the tomato cage, hits the top, bends over, and it's a pinch point, and then it starts killing itself at that juncture there. And usually tomato cages are about this tall. These plants are about 12 feet tall now. This picture was taken a while back, but they're 8-foot T-posts, and at the top, if you put I think it's a 2-inch, you have to check, 2-inch PVC pipe on the top of that, it extends your T-post. So you can raise them up there, and when you're done, you can take them down. So I like to use those because they fit real snug on there. And even if they're too wide as they're going down, you can drive a dowel in there and have that dowel go in and rest. And then you can put that dowel any height you want. If you have T-posts of different sizes, you can put them all in the same row and use the pipe to level them all out as you go. And as we grow, the next level of the canopy is going to shading the bottom. So these start dying off naturally. And what I want to avoid is having too much of this. That's going to be an attractant for a bug, that yellow leaf right there. So what we do is we clean them up from the bottom. And so we're cutting the leaves off all the way up. And as the tomato grows, it's going to put out suckers. Sucker is another term for just another branch. I don't want another branch. I want my tomatoes to look like a fruit tree on the orchard. One trunk, one single stem going up, and then it can open up at the canopy. And the reason that being, it alternates between a fruit-bearing stem and a floral site, a fruit-bearing stem and a floral site, fruit-bearing stem and a floral site. And you'll see that go up and up and up. And if I were to allow them to come off the sides, I would totally crowd this area out. And by the time the next side of the canopy grew up, it'd be too shaded and not have enough airflow. Tomatoes really benefit, the tomato benefits from sunlight. It helps it ripen a lot quicker. They'll still ripen in the shade. So these would take probably about 30% longer to ripen than these would. Just that difference in sunshine. And the Florida weave, you can reach through, around. It's very manageable to prune things out. If this plant dies, I can prune this plant out and remove it and not have to affect anything else in there. Yes, sir.
Is there a particular material of rope, twine, etc., that it's idealistic to use so that it doesn't like cause a laceration into the plant?
No, you're going to get a little bit of, if you see two branches growing on a tree and they have friction, you'll see that bark. It'll show that on the back a little bit, and it will express a little bit on there just because of the friction. Mm-hmm. But as long as that's gradually done, so this is the other part about the Florida weave. As the plant grows, stay on top of staking it. Because if you have a plant that's real floppy and starts getting heavy, and then you try and stake it up, then it's got all that weight already, and then you try and string it up and you get those pinch points on there. So this is almost a scaffolding system to direct the plant where to grow. And then after that, it's going to use all its friends to kind of hang there evenly. And you'll see as they grow taller, you'll see this bend here. That's the branches putting on weight, and that's the tomatoes pulling down.
Is that a nylon string? Or?
That is nylon. I like nylon because it's a little bit more sturdy and dependable. If you want to use hemp, that's compostable.
I was going to say hemp.
Yeah, it's a lot.
Nylon.
I trust the nylon a little bit better because I take a lot of this to market, so I don't want to come out one morning and have the deer chew through a hemp rope and have $100 of tomatoes on the ground just because, and then you're never going to get them back up after that. It's like
Year before last, I went to the thrift store and I got a whole bunch of yarn. It was like nothing, dollar-wise, and I just used that and I intertwined it.
perfect.
I haven't done that for 2 years. So.
I imagine if it's cotton, it wouldn't last 2 years. I imagine the sun and the rain would knock it out.
Yeah, it's big cost.
Yeah, I'll go with the pair of scissors and I'll cut every cut there, and I'll go to the other end and I'll pull all the nylon out and we'll throw it away. So types of tomato plants, determinate versus indeterminate. Determinate means it's got an alarm clock set. I'm gonna grow 5 feet tall, I'm gonna put off 30 tomatoes, and then I'm gonna call it, and we're gonna turn brown and die. And typically those genetics come from areas where it's a short growing season, because they don't have all season like we do here. If you're up north, you're probably gonna wanna go for some determinate plants. If you look up Brad from Wild Boar Farms, he's a local guy. He used to be out in Vacaville and Napa. He contract grows out there, but he lives in Citrus Heights area now. And his tomatoes have been on the Baker Creek seed catalog. And he's local. And he's doing some really good genetics. They're doing hybrids, so F1s, and they're doing F2 and F3. So they're taking the grandparents, the parents, and the grandkids, and they're using 3 different generations before they select a line that they like. They'll name it and release it to the local area. If you go on seed catalogs, Baker Creek is so big, oftentimes some things you buy there may not grow well here, maybe because those seeds were grown from Georgia and the trials were done in Georgia and they sold their whole big batch of 10 million seeds and now they're selling them all over the country. So just like you and your neighbor's house are different, you might overlap in some microclimates and growing zones. You might have success or a little bit more failure depending on what type of tomato you go with.
I think I've grown like 15 of his, and every single one is beautiful and tastes great.
Yeah, they're gorgeous. They last a long time. And I like the indeterminate because I want them to keep going. I've got enough space and I'm prepared to let them go and let them ride. And if you have them outside and they're healthy, you can get tomatoes almost through November, through Thanksgiving. And if you have a greenhouse or a hoop house, you can put up, they'll extend it. Yeah, cold frame even better. End of summer comes, take your tomatoes, just cut them in half. So if they're 6 feet tall, cut them down to 3, you can cut them and then put a cold frame over that and you get some more growth. When we went to go back to the Florida weave for a moment. So right now what's happening on my plants, I harvested these months ago, and I'm already harvesting stuff about at the 8-foot level right now. So what's happening now is it's actually putting out brand new shoots at the bottom. So brand new nodes are growing up. So I'm having a second growth out of these tomatoes basically. And by the time these branches start growing from the bottom, I'm gonna be clear cutting the top of that canopy because it'll be tired from summertime. And you'll notice the quality of the leaves decline. You'll notice the brown tips, you notice some imperfections, you'll notice some blemishes. And when you get up higher up on the plant, you'll notice that's a little bit more, looks like perfection. So that brand new young skin, as the plant ages, it gets beat up by the sun and the rain. So that's another reason we want to continue to prune as we go up. And then when it's done, you can cut and then get a cold frame on there for another round. So popular tomato cultivars and their characteristics. Roma, or for paste, sometimes you hear them called paste tomatoes. Those are basically used for sauces, for pastas pretty much exclusively. You can get away with doing pizza sauces, but the salsa is not going to have the same kick with the paste tomato as it would with the beefsteak or a yellow, yellow colorful one. I like yellow tomatoes, a little bit less acidic than some of the reds for the salsas. If you can pair them with tomatillos or ground cherries to kind of knock down some of the acidity and add some sweetness to it. Depends on what colors. If you're doing a Halloween themed party, then maybe you want to get an orange one to pair with something that's really dark on there, so your orange and black theme, or San Francisco Giants, or whatever football sports team you might like, there's probably a tomato color combination to play with. And so if you get cherry tomatoes, they're generally going to be a little bit more meaty on the ratio. You're not going to be really squishy as a larger tomato. You can really feel it gives a little bit as you squeeze, almost like a water balloon would, as opposed to the cherries, they're just going to pop. So if you're on a salad, and if you're serving whole tomatoes on a salad, you take that bite, they pop in your mouth, as opposed to like the smush on a sandwich. So depending on what texture you like, if you're doing charcuterie boards, if you're doing roasted tomatoes, the peel is going to come off, and then you can have that roasted flavor. So some varieties cook better than others, depending on their composition. And with a thinner skin, they don't take the oven heat very well. They get a little wrinkled. And then a lot of the watery tomatoes, if you're not elevating them on a rack when you're cooking them, they end up just stewing they stew in their own juices instead of dropping that juice out and roasting, because you want to dehydrate them and roast them when you're doing that. So beefsteaks, I love beefsteaks for BLT, sandwiches, burgers. It doesn't matter how fat you want to slice them, and it always works out really well, especially if you're making bread. Fresh bread on a sandwich with a fresh tomato, yeah, you're rocking and rolling. Bacon, tomato, and basil is also a good combo. So you can pair tomato and basil with pretty much anything. And I brought 5 different types to try with the tomatoes. They're on the little bouquet back there.
How do you think you need to do a cookbook?
Maybe, it's in the future. Cherry tomatoes for snacking, they pack a lot better on a picnic. Or if you have kids you're sending off to a lunch, cherry tomatoes are the way to go. If you give a kid a 1-pound tomato, by the time they get to school, it's going to be soup and smashed. So it also speaks to why are you growing, what are you going to use them for? You have your space set up to process these. And also talk with your friends and neighbors. Don't grow the same variety as they do. Trade, grow something different, and then trade and swap. So it's kind of our culture, how we bring stuff in the back to trade with each other. We don't get bored of the same food.
Yeah, let your neighbor grow those San Marzanos, and then you do this.
Yep. Or if you have a hot pepper, aficionado, then have somebody grow some not spicy ones. So you get to. Because my wife, she doesn't like the spicy too much, so she feels kind of left out sometimes. Kind of like more heat, more heat.
Yeah.
And then with the color, tomatoes have a different color composition based on their skin and their flesh. So when you're looking at a tomato, you're looking at a combination of colors in there, and that's what makes the tomato flesh. Take a tomato and peel it, and you'll start to see different colors come back, and you'll see the flesh is a different color under there as well. I've got 2 brothers. One's about my height, the other one's this tall. You might have a redhead in the family. So just because you grow a tomato doesn't mean that they're all going to look the same. They're all going to have a little bit tiny expressions. And the term for that's called a phenotype. So it's all the same genetic input, but you're getting these different results. And that's nature's way of adapting and finding a new way to survive. And that's cultivar's way to find new flavors, new colors, and new varieties that grow differently. Because you'll see some tomatoes that may set 2 or 3 per rack, and you'll see other ones that just go like Goldilocks, and they'll have 20 or 30 on there. Which is also going to have an effect on your water usage. If you're up the hill in the foothills and you're on a meter or you're on a well, you may not be able to afford the water volume to just feed all these big tomatoes all the time. So maybe you might be more geared to doing cherry tomatoes, keep your water consumption a little bit lower as well.
Quick question. Have you done the climatizing thing with seeds and whatnot? with tomato plants or peppers, you know, when you buy a seed pack from whoever, Bees, whatever, and you grow it for several generations, and then after, say, 5 years of growing it, you collect the seed. Have you noticed a difference in that at all?
Difference in
Does this
the next
change?
the next generation?
Well, they call it climatizing. So let's say, for instance, you just said, I said burpees, but no.
Beefsteak.
No, not beefsteak. The guys out of Missouri, the Mennonite guys. Baker Creek. So they're out of Missouri, right? So they do their stuff there, and then all of a sudden you're in California or whatever, and you grow it, you let it go to seed, and it's called climatizing.
Yeah, you could do some trials but I don't want to waste time. I want to buy something that I know what it is. I don't want to have to buy something to.
Okay.
It's fun to experiment. You definitely can. With seed saving, if you have 100 seeds, well, it doesn't matter with the amount, but take 10% of your seeds and just germinate them, even if you're going to throw them away. So germinate them, and if only 5 out of the 10 germinate, that's a 50% germination success rate. So now you know out of the 90 seeds you have, probably only 45 are going to be good. And if you wait till the next year, it might be 35, maybe 25. So when you get to a threshold, when you bottom out on a threshold, a minimum, then that's something you're going to want to put out in the garden again and get a new round of plants going. And most of the time, tomatoes are self-pollinating. You really kind of have to work hard to cross-pollinate a tomato. And honeybees don't visit tomatoes. Usually it's your native bees. Carpenter bees are one of your biggest tomato pollinators. And they don't stick their face in there to pollinate. They hang on the branch and vibrate their wings. And just like you take a balloon, rub a balloon on your head, and your hair, I guess if you have hair, your hair flies up. So when the bees are flying through the air, they're going to build up a charge in the air through the air resistance. And then the earth is also going to provide a ground charge. So when the bee comes to land on the flower, that is discharging. So the pollen sticks right to the bee. And that's when you see the bees kind of taking the pollen and shimmying it down their body to pack it on the legs. And that's when you'll often see a honeybee hovering. And it looks like they're just, doing this with their legs, like ha 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 ha. And they're just hovering. They're like this. And they're just building like a dough ball basically, so they can pack that on their legs there. So with the carpenter bees, when they pollinate tomatoes, and they're native pollinators, so they're native to the Americas, just like the nightshades are. Asia, Europe, Africa, they don't have tomatoes, so they didn't have them to begin with. So native pollinators go to native plants. So that's why it's really important for nightshades here to support California local native pollinators. If you're doing I think it's the black Solanum nigrum, it's the black nightshade. That's the edible one you can grow out here. There are some toxic ones. The belladonna is out here as well. That'll make you pretty sick or kill you. But point being said, eggplant, potato, peppers, tomatoes, they're all going to benefit from those carpenter bees. In the heat of the summer, you'll see the honeybees kind of give up and go to the peppers, but it's not their favorite, their ideal one.
How do you collect the seeds from the tomatoes?
It's a little bit of a fermenting process, basically. You kind of just squish the tomato open and let it sit for 2 or 3 days. Because each seed has a gel pack around it, and that gel pack's a timer designed to be decomposed in the winter elements. But if you want to grow it to save it, then you're letting it ferment, and that fermentation's eating away that gel. And then the seeds slide right out. You dry them, and they're ready to go. Because otherwise, they'd rot in the ground, and then that gel would kind of diminish until everything was basically dried out. And then they don't germinate until they get that temperature hit. So they're kind of almost like a fungus spore. They're almost in stasis until they get to their germination temperature threshold.
Do you think that's better than just drying them straight on a paper towel or cotton filter just from the get-go? Because I've done that and I've had good success, but I have everything fermenting on the bookshelf right now.
I think fermenting's, if you're going to save seeds for the future, for food security or just to retain a lineage, then fermenting and letting them dry out is a good way to go. Because that way you can filter out all the organic matter and material. You want all the organic matter out of there except seeds. You only want embryos in the bag.
And you pick the ones at the bottom and not floaters, right?
Depends. And also depends on what time of year you're picking that tomato to grow from seed. I don't want to choose a tomato in the middle of August. The plant's stressed by the heat. I don't want to use that tomato seed to grow. I want to get a seed from May or July or May or June when they're growing a little bit more healthy. Yes?
The
quick note about seeds. I used to work for a seed packet manufacturer, and I took a note. Baker Creek seeds aren't from Missouri. They are seed packet manufacturers. They curate, they get seeds from growers
All over the world.
All over the world.
Yeah.
Oh,
And
okay.
and they're all grown for maximum climate. I used to work for Dacy garden seeds, so it was,
Okay.
we would test them, but they're not all from their farm.
Okay.
And there's so many varieties, like I call them designer genetics.
Same.
That's almost like Dacy, right? But not entirely.
So there's no nectar in a tomato because it's self-pollinating. So why spend resources to produce a sugary carbohydrate if I'm self-pollinating? So that's why you don't see honeybees on tomatoes. And the carpenter bees are only out in the mornings. When it gets too hot, they have to go collect water. So in the mornings, you also have yellow jacket pressure. Yellow jackets are pollinators, but not for nightshades, because we have the Eastern European yellow jacket, again, not native, so they don't really know what to do with these. Honeybees don't either. So if people want to plant things to help the bees, I would recommend planting native plants as opposed to catering to honeybees. That's coming from a beekeeper. Consider your growing season. We talked about that with the indeterminate varieties that grow sky high. And then we also talked about times that fit your growing season, length to optimal harvest. So tomatoes are going crazy in the summer. If you've got kids and you're going to soccer games and you're going on vacations and you're gone for weeks at a time, maybe some varieties may not work so well that are bigger. So cherry tomatoes keep a lot better if you're out of town. And then cherry tomatoes are a lot less prone to splitting if you overwater. And I overwater all the time. If you look at some of the tomatoes back there, you'll see the tops are split. So leave the water on too long. Because it is on a timer, but I don't want to give a consistent dose if the temperature is different. If it's windy, it's going to dry out faster, so I know I'm going to have to hit it again.
Are you watering it from above or below?
Below, and I'll show the product that we use on there is the drip tape from Toro. And account for disease resistance. Go out and look at your plants. Go out, lift their skirts, see what's going on. Check the undersides of the leaves, see if you see any eggs, see if you see any chew marks, any tomatoes on the ground from rats or deer. Just give it a little inspection, and I call it brushing your teeth. Just do it. Just get out there and do it. It may not be fun if it's hot, but it's going to save you maybe a big bushel of tomatoes down the road if you could just get rid of the caterpillars if you would have gone out there to look. Speaking from experience, I've seen whole plants just decimated by caterpillars, and they can have a really high pressure. If you live under oak trees or an area near cottonwoods, and this time of year, almost any canopy will facilitate caterpillars from kind of linking down and checking things out. Preparing for planting. When you have a tomato plant at the nursery, they're usually about 1 foot tall, and they're usually in like a 4-inch or maybe a liter size pot. We bury that thing up to its neck, kind of like they do the pirates back in the day, bury them on the beach. And so when you have your soil bed ready to go, and I don't like to feed the plants, I like to feed the soil. So instead of that direct line, it's a buffer. So you take care of your soil and keep that tied up, the plant can pull from it whatever it needs. It doesn't want to have to wait for you to give it to the soil and then the soil work it and then it's too late by that time. So sunlight, tomatoes need 6 to 8 hours of full sun to grow. And that's to thrive. They'll grow, but you want them to really thrive and take off. So when we plant them 12 inches apart, that's a really important reason why we cut off our suckers on the side. We want little number 2 pencils going up, and we want fruit hanging from each rack, and they're not going to spread out. Soil and drainage, they like to dry out, but if they dry out too much, the tomatoes almost deflate, and when you water again and they rehydrate, that's when you get that skin split. A lot of varieties benefit from and it's not the amount of water, give them 1 inch of water a week. Go out there and put your finger in the soil, and if it's at all moist, then you're not going to want to water. It's better to let plants wilt from the heat than it is to overwater them and give them too much water. Because then what happens, it's warm, the plants can't uptake all the water, and plant roots need oxygen. If they're submerged, the only oxygen they're going to get is what's in the water content, which rapidly diminishes if they're sitting there soaking. So by letting the plant drain and dry, you're getting oxygen to the roots, and you're also getting oxygen to the microbes in the soil, which is more important than worrying about your plants wilting. Keeping your microbiome healthy is going to allow you to spend a lot less money on fertilizers and nutrients down the road by maintaining that little ecosystem. And you talked about chaos earlier. That's kind of what it is. If you go to a square yard, I'll have basil, onion, ground cherry, amaranth, and it's just all kind of spread throughout. Got a few beets poking out here and there, and I do my headers with mints to keep the Bermuda out. So it's just all intermixed because I want to intermix my pollinators, I want to intermix my root growth, because you go out in nature, things are thriving, and they're not in any sort of order or line. Wind protection and crop rotation. If you live in a really exposed area, wind protection is important. And you can put up T-posts, and there's different types of fencing that you can put up that's not too ugly, but it'll mitigate some of the airflow. Crop rotation is important. A lot of the nightshades, they're susceptible to what's called a tobacco mosaic virus. So it's the same thing that'll affect tobacco. It'll also affect mainly tomatoes. It can get potatoes and peppers and eggplant as well. And it can get ground cherries, and it can get anything else in the nightshade family out there. And that lives in the soil. So when I'm pruning my plants, I'm not cutting it and letting it drop. I'm cutting it and throwing it into the aisle. When I'm done, I'm coming back through the aisle, I'm collecting all that, and it's going to the compost that's far away. Because the compost will take care of basically any disease problems can go there and just rot for the season. But if you drop that and it's infected, it gets in the soil, and then you water, and you walk around, and you stomp it everywhere, now you're spreading that out. And then we see the same problem with leaf curl and stone fruits. People cut the infected off, and they'll go throw it in their green waste. And then green waste takes it to the county refuse and chews it up and spreads it everywhere. And then everyone goes, picks it up and puts it in their garden, and now everybody's getting leaf curl. So wind protection and crop rotation, that's part of our integrated pest management. By planting things to be conducive to your plant's health, so you're not out there having to spray things to prevent a fungus from taking over.
What are the symptoms of the tobacco mold?
I don't have any pictures of it, but it's pretty prevalent online, and it almost looks like a rust color on the leaf and brown.
Okay.
But it happens in spots where you'd expect it to see if you were to bruise the leaf. It looks like someone bruised the leaf or sandpapered them, and it really retards the growth. So you'll see the growth nodes kind of start, and they get a little bit curled. You'll see the similar, it almost looks like they got sprayed by an herbicide, or like a Roundup almost.
Can I ask a compost question, a little bit off topic? At our garden, we have 2 compost piles, and no one's really done anything with them. And so I would say they're 75% weed in there. My thought is to just clear it all out and start over.
Yeah.
Or, I mean, it's been in there for 2 or 3 years too.
Just clear it out. Spread it out. Yeah.
Get rid of it.
Start
not
fresh.
Try to,
Now, your compost is essentially a culture, so you're building a big bed of microbes.
right.
And if it's just languishing with what has been there natively, it's been drying out too much, it's probably settled and compacted, and it's not getting oxygen in there.
Completely dry.
Yeah.
Because the good bacteria, there's good bacteria on both sides, but you have aerobic and anaerobic bacteria. So aerobic means it has access to oxygen, and anaerobic means it thrives without the presence of oxygen. And so some of those compost ones, you're better off getting the oxygen-loving microbes as opposed to, because the anaerobic would be a tea where you don't use an air stone. You could put a bunch of stinging nettle into a 5-gallon bucket, fill it with water, shut it, leave it in the sun for 3 days, come back out. That's an anaerobic tea, as opposed to putting amendments in a bucket with an air stone, letting it bubble. Because those you're typically inoculating with different microbe species and then giving them molasses or carbohydrate to grow and propagate. So I like compost teas as opposed to composting because it's a lot quicker. I can get a compost tea done in 2 days, and I can get all that out to the plants. Compost, I don't want it to devote that area to get what I could have done in 3 days.
Do you ever put weeds in the compost pile?
A weed is a plant in an undesired location. It could be a redwood tree, it could be a cannabis plant, it could be, if I don't want it there, it's a weed. So put something in your ratio, and we'll go into this stuff in the fall when we do gardening classes as well, but there's proper ratios and things to put in, yeah, indeed. Yes.
Sorry, quick question on compost also. I just started a compost pile, and I put a lot of waste from vegetables and fruit in it, and eggshells and whatnot. And all of a sudden, I watered it all down really good. And then all of a sudden I have a fly problem over there. So I just put dirt on top of it, or just
Carbon. Maybe carbon material.
More brown stuff.
more brown stuff?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, okay.
Tree mold. leaves, etc.
And keeping it turned is essential.
You don't have to turn it, you just carbon
just put it.
nitrogen, carbon nitrogen.
So soil pH, something you really don't have to worry about in this area. If you're in some funky spots in the foothills, you might have some clay that's a little bit more acidic, but that's kind of to the tomato's advantage. And then pH stands for potential hydrogen, and that's a long way of saying it's a keyhole that changes sizes. So if your pH is at one value, it may be able to uptake nutrients very well. But if your pH is not within the right value, that shape's going to get funky, and you're not going to be able to put the square peg into the round hole anymore. So different chemicals require different pH in the soil to be absorbed by the plant or to successfully get into the soil and be distributed. So it's not something you have to worry about here. If you're getting oyster shells, you're adding oyster shells to your garden, that's a little bit more alkaline. So I would add some coffee grounds to lower that back down, get it a little bit more acidic. And you can look up for this is another composting thing. You can look up and see what's good and bad and ugly in composting, because some things are good to use, some are bad to use, some are kind of dependent on what your goals are. Organic matter enrichment. My definition of organic means it's a carbon-based element, just from a strictly chemistry-based look. It means I also want things in my garden that are not organic. Iron, any type of metal is not considered organic. But zinc and iron, calciums, all those different elements are not organic, but they're essential for the plant. So in terms of organic, it doesn't mean good, bad, natural, unnatural. Organic means it's a building block. You can build with it and it can break itself down. As opposed to a piece of metal. It's always going to be a piece of metal, whether it's on a piece of jewelry or a belt or a zipper. You can't ever break it down and have it be something else. So organic matter is huge. I think horse manure is probably superior. I don't know if it's because they have multiple stomachs and that's multiple microbes. And if they're eating alfalfa, open grass, horse manure there's probably nothing better than horse manure. If you're getting it fresh, I would advise putting it in the fall and letting the rains hit it. Or put it in a pile and have a sprinkler hit it for 20 minutes a night. Middle of the night, have a sprinkler just turn on and hit the horse manure. And that's going to decompose it a lot quicker. And it'll make it so it won't burn the plants as much when you put them in there.
Do you go in and turn it at all, or?
We don't do tilling. We add on top. We'll use broad forks. So the broad fork, it's almost like a hay fork, but it's just big. And so you stick it into the ground, I think about 12 to 18 inches. So it drives 4 or 5 tines into the ground, and you're standing on it, and you pull it back. And we're not lifting it up to turn it. We're just sticking it in there just to break it. So you just break it, and you go up another foot, and you just break it, and you go up and just break it. So we're reducing that soil compaction. We're allowing air to get back in there. And so we do that every season as we add organic matter. So horse manure, worm castings, granular sea kelp, all those are really fantastic. And you almost can't overuse those. Yes, sir.
Would you amend your compost with those as well?
No, they have compost starters. And it's almost like a culture. If you're eating yogurt, it'll tell you what species, like I think it's acidophilus or whatever they use in the yogurt. You can buy inoculants for compost to jumpstart them and get them going. It's almost like if you take antibiotics, you've got no gut bacteria anymore. And so some foods may upset you until you get those probiotics, and that's going to help break those foods down a little bit easier and be better on your gut, and you'll feel a lot better.
So putting, say, a horse manure into your compost, would that be just as bioavailable later on to your plants?
Yes.
If you were to put it directly?
Absolutely.
So there's still value in having those organic, manure. If you've got it on and you're not ready to put it up in your plants, tossing it in the compost, that will still be bioavailable later on.
Yes.
Okay.
And if you can just not mess with it, you can have a truckload come in from Hastie's and just put it in the corner in the fall and just leave it there. And then when you're ready to plant in the spring, you can shovel that in its entirety. You can almost plant directly into composted horse manure.
And so then how do I explain to my wife I've got a big pile of shit?
That's why you don't explain it to me.
I will say Hastie's.
The other cool thing is that if you have spoiled milk, yogurts, cottage cheese, etc., that is awesome for a pasture.
Oh, really?
Oh, absolutely.
Hastie's has really good cheap horse manure. I think it's like $80 a yard or something. And
I think it is, but I have a friend. You make friends with someone who has horses.
Yes.
Which I do. And I have free access to all her piled shit that she puts in the back. So she told me where to go. She goes, get the one on the back because that's the older one. But I mean, it's honestly any local horse farm place. If you ask them, they'll get to you for free.
We have a shadow plan within a couple miles.
Yeah, I mean,
Go trade. See, I'll trade you some tomatoes. I'll trade you.
Yeah, it's too expensive.
Sheep and goat are really good as well. Because think about it, if you're trying to grow a plant, why not use an animal that's only eating plants and they're just processing it for you and you're just going to give that right back to them. That's optimal. Alfalfa is really good. Same thing in the roses. You talked about grandma using Epsom salts and alfalfa in the wintertime on her roses. Alfalfa has a lot of silicas in it. And silica does a lot of things for plants. It almost coats every cell wall and it'll help with the plant structure. If you're growing for dry weight, it'll add weight to your plant. It'll increase the tolerance to heat and drought. So if you miss a day of watering, high silica from alfalfa is going to help your plants endure that better. Yes?
What about chicken manure mixed with the straw?
Same thing with horse. As long as it's composted down, it's good. If you're going to have fresh chicken manure, I wouldn't put more than 10% by volume into a garden in the spring to start.
It's sat over the winter.
Yeah.
Okay.
And when you look at the numbers on the nutrient bottle, it's usually 3 numbers on there. And it's nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. The nitrogen number, you can't really get higher than like a 10 with organic matter. With synthetics, with chemicals, that's when you start to see the 35, 20, 31. I can't remember what his name was, but he invented a machine that basically pumps the nitrogen out of the air, and nitrogen in the atmosphere is N2, so it's 2 nitrogen with a covalent bond. And he figured out a way to pump nitrogen into a machine and have it come out as a 3N, which is ammonia. So ammoniacal nitrogen is a term you see on fertilizer bottles. So by him using that machine, he's making the nitrogen that plants need. But that's what our microbes already do in the soil for the plants. So the compost is going to convert that nitrogen into a usable form, basically, because the air, and it's backwards. If you think plants need water, and part of that's the nitrogen, but I'm saying it backwards, pardon me. So with plants absorb CO2 to perform photosynthesis, but they also need oxygen in the roots. I can't remember where I was going with that. It'll come back. We'll touch on it. Soil drainage, same thing. Because anaerobic bacteria are surviving in there, you want a cycle of wet and dry to allow them both to thrive and cohabitate in there. Starting seeds indoors versus purchasing seedlings. It just all depends. I've seen some horrific things come out of every place. Green Acres is generally one of the better places for plant quality around, as opposed to Home Depot or an Ace Hardware. You'll have better luck at an Ace Hardware because they're more family owned and franchised, so they have a little bit more attention to their plants. But someone at Home Depot is just buying all the plants and they get shipped to a place, not going to inspect them. So keep an eye out where you're buying the plants and what condition they're in. I'm pretty picky with them. I'll pop them out of each individual cell sometime at the store and see what their roots are looking like. Because if you've ever grown a squash or a pumpkin, they germinate almost overnight. So if you're going to buy a pack of seeds, just go buy a pack of seeds instead of spending $4 on one seed that's growing, if that makes sense. And I like to get about 20% more plants than what I need, because I don't want to plant something in the ground that's got a C grade. That needs to be not in my garden. They need to be A's or B's. So if I'm buying 100 plants, I better buy 125 and assume that 25% of those are not going to make the cut and I'm not going to be able to fill my plot, my allocation.
Do you still plant them all and then just cut down the ones that you don't think are going to make it? Or?
This is a 162 cell tray. And so after they fill this space, I'll put them into 4-inch pots. And if they look above standard, they'll make it out of here into a 4-inch pot. And if they don't, I'll throw them away. So I'm constantly culling out the weak ones and the underperforming ones.
Will you put multiple seeds in a single pot and then cut the stem of one that's not doing so well?
Yeah, on these 162 cells I won't, because there's so many cells on a tray. But if you're doing it on a smaller number, do some insurance. Put 2 or 3 seeds in a cell. So if one doesn't germinate, you're not wasting that volume and that time on that one. And the seeds, they're pretty tough. They're not as big, so they won't dry out as fast because it's earlier in the season. But that also means they're not going to have as much of a buffer. So these can outgrow their cells really quickly. So time it right and look at the weather pattern. You can go online and look at the daily weather average, day by day or week by week. And I like to wait until the temperatures are about 50 degrees at night to put these tomatoes out in the field. Because at night, that cool air descends and it gets low right where the plants are, and it really slows down their growth. So if you can wait until it's about 50 degrees consistently at night, you're going to have a lot more success. Because mainly the soil temperature is the issue. If they get wet feet and they're cold, they're not going to last too long. And plants drink up water in part not only to grow, but to stay cool in the heat. If it's not hot and you're watering, it's got really no reason to draw up water, especially when they're that young. And I treat it like you see a lazy boy, the guy doesn't want to get up, bring me my food, I want to sit here. So if you're watering and irrigating and fertilizing, don't put the water point right next to your plants. Start backing it out as the plant grows after you get it in the ground. So that's another reason we don't want them to stay in here too long. I want to get them into a bigger pot and then water that so they grow and fill that area. So the more I can get those roots to go out is going to be more beneficial. Because if you plant a tiny cell like this and the roots are all curled up together, and you plant it, it's going to grow curled up together. It's just going to turn into a bigger ball. And essentially that's being root bound without being in a pot. The advantage of purchasing seedlings, that's already been graded by the grower. They look great, they're on the table, they're ready for sale. And if you have a couple of varieties that maybe you want to fill in the gaps, I would go with a purchased seedling instead of growing your own. And we talked about earlier about maintaining your space and prepping for it. If you don't have a space to start seeds, or if you have cats, they're going to stomp on everything or bite it or eat it, you might want to go with the seedlings. Or you can get a little greenhouse. This is a greenhouse we built this last season for our seedlings. And then that advantage gives us, I can put all these plants in the ground that are 2 feet tall in April, as opposed to go in May and buy little brand new ones from the store. And I also like to sequentially grow. I don't put all my seeds in one basket, essentially. I want to do 2 or 3 rounds of seed starting. If we get exceptionally poor weather, then I have a second and third round to see me through. Or if we have a heat wave and it just totally wipes them out, I've got a couple other ones ready to go.
I've been starting stuff at the Food Bank Farm greenhouse for a while and having the greenhouse. Like I started at home and I started through the Food Bank Farm. The difference there is amazing.
Yeah.
What they put up, they're doing great. The current manager stresses them on purpose so they'd be better going to the ground.
Good.
Which you wouldn't sell them because they look horrible, but yeah, they did wonderful.
You can use oscillating fans if you're growing seeds inside. And it's like giving your plants a workout. If they're just sitting inside, they don't have to deal with any wind. The minute they get out there, the first gust of wind is going to snap them in half. So this helps build them up. So I like to see these roots like a white spaghetti pasta color. I don't want to see them start to get brown. That's almost a little bit too dry. And then those main roots right there, as long as you see nice white color there, you're in good shape. You'll notice, you can even take a couple plants and set them aside and not water them. And you can check the roots as the plants die, and that'll give you an indication of what to look for. Planting depth, talked about it earlier. If I'm a tomato plant, I'm planting up to here. This is going to be the ground level. Anything on the tomato plant that touches the ground or is buried is going to start growing roots. So instead of growing a plant this tall with this much roots, I'm going to put it in the ground and have this many roots to start this plant. So you get a lot better start, and it really accelerates the plant.
So you have that plant right there. Are you taking off the leaves on the bottom?
Yep, I'm going to trim those leaves off right there and there and there. And then this is going to be the ground level right about there on that one. So you'll come out and you'll see little plugs. That's all it's going to be showing out of the top. I've seen some people plant them, they dig a trench and they plant it sideways and they leave the end sticking out. And so this whole area acts like that. So if you have a hard pan, something you can't get through, lay them down. But if you can broad fork them, then you can get down even further. My favorite thing to do is to put the drip line down and then kind of use a hoe or a rake and build furrows. So you have these, kind of looks like Bugs Bunny went under the ground. They left that big old mound of dirt in a row. So the drip line is at ground level. I mound the dirt up over the top and I plant into the mound, and the bottom of that root ball is touching the drip line. And by planting with the irrigation underneath the ground, it reduces any broadcast water, so less water to let weeds grow. and less evaporation. The water's going down almost like an IV right where the plant needs it. So planting depth also has to do with your soil composition and your ability to irrigate, because those three things together is going to dictate what your soil moisture is going to be like. Optimal plant spacing, 18, that's even a little bit too far for me, because I like to do those single plants going straight up. So it all depends on how much space you have. And then use of support or structures. We've seen the cages, trellises. They look really nice if you have an arbor or a patio set up that you can have them go up. I'm sure you guys have seen, they sell apples, and they'll sell apples in the little espalier. And basically it's a 3 meter or 1 meter squared of a plant, just a big wall. So you can kind of direct them to grow like that. Then you're almost growing a solar panel, and you're making optimal use of all the sun on the south-facing exposed area. Disease prevention and benefits. There's a bacteria you can apply to the tomato plants, and it'll kill caterpillars. So it'll only kill lepidopteran insects, and it works through larval mortality. The caterpillar has to eat that bacteria and consume it, and it'll kill it. So you're not killing off the adult butterfly or moth population, and you're not killing off the eggs of the butterfly and moth population.
Where do you get this?
Any store you can find it. I would encourage to go to a hydroponic store. You'll find stuff at Home Depot, you'll find stuff at Green Acres, but the higher quality things you're going to find are going to be at hydroponic stores. And there's a couple up along 80 in Roseville area. They have superior ingredients, like they have like fish emulsion, sea kelp in a liquid and a granular. They have glacial rock dust. They just kind of have everything. And we'll go into a lot of those things in detail in the fall when we do our modules for the fertilizers and amendments.
That is interesting.
So this is the product that I really like. It's made by Toro. They make sprinkler company in irrigation. Essentially, it's a tube. It's 5/8 tube with a very small channel at the very top. So the bottom channel of the tube carries the water flow, and the top channel that the water is allowed to flow into, this is the pressure compensating part of the tube. And you can pick at what interval you want your emitter to be. I like the ones with 8 inches apart. So every 8 inches, there's going to be series of emitters. And this product was designed to use in vineyards, so rolling hills. So it doesn't matter at what point on your irrigation run you're emitting water, it's going to have the same emission rate consistently, no matter if it's at the peak of the hill or the bottom of the valley. Conventional drip irrigation allows gravity to apply a lot more water at the bottom to plants. You can step on it, you can walk on it, and it's about $250 for a mile of it. It's the cheapest, most effective, most efficient thing, and nobody carries it at the grocery store. I mean, not grocery store. Nobody carries at Home Depot. No, I'm trying to get Green Acres to switch over to this because you'll vastly reduce the amount of water you're going to put down, and you can water a lot more frequently depending on the depth of your soil. If I'm growing basil, shallow plant, I'm watering more frequently and less volume. If I'm growing deep tomatoes, I'm watering less frequently with a higher volume of water.
Now you said a thoroughfare, so you walk, but what about, a side-by-side, an ATV, a small tractor or something?
I feel like the tractor would do pretty well if you get it below the ground under some bark and wood chips.
Okay.
But
so
I'm
just protected, obviously.
Yeah, I'll hit it and bust it with like a fork or a hoe, and it's so cheap. You got a mile of it for $250. You just go cut it and slice it back in there.
That's wicked cheap.
How long does it last? How many seasons?
I've had some out for 4 years and not had a problem. And it starts off of 15 psi. So you're gonna have to get a pressure regulator for this to knock it down to 15. Most pressure regulators at the store are 30, maybe 25 around here. But so 15 psi, a lot less pressure, a lot lower flow. If you're on a well, this is ideal. Or if you're on a meter, that's gonna save you a lot of money on the garden.
That's amazing.
The stuff's amazing. I can't say enough about it. And because they're 8 inches apart, I'll take 2 runs and run them next to each other, and I'll make sure that the runs are alternating. So I've got 4 inches in a zigzag line using those 2 down there.
All right, we're just coming up on an hour, so I don't know if you're wanting to get through much more in your presentation or not.
Yes. The honey part's going to be fast. The honey's going to be informal. We'll be tasting and talking as we go. And then we kind of covered a lot of this. In lieu of time, we'll Yeah, we'll save some of this for the fall. Or maybe do the honey talk another time. We taste it tonight. We'll do that. We'll taste it tonight. We'll do another.
You're welcome to come back and do the honey talk.
No, we'll do that. We'll do that.
Next month or,
So identifying ripeness. When tomato is green, you can do fried green tomatoes at the end of the season if that's all that's left. We call it the blush, and that first bit of color starts to come in. And after about 30 to 50% of the colors coming in, leaving it on the vine is not going to make it have any more color. So you could pull the tomato, which would look like a couple days early, and set it on the counter, and it'll ripen its way up. So if you're harvesting every 4 or 5 days, you can go out and harvest everything and kind of eat what's more ripe first and leave the unripe stuff to the back and get through that later. That way you're not having a chore of every single day going out to pick tomatoes when they're perfectly in their window. Because once they get 30 to 50% of that, they've got everything they really need. Harvesting techniques. This is how I like to see them come off the vine. They'll naturally have an abscission, and the plants put off hormones, and they'll naturally form an abscission until it'll break off there. But that's very variety specific. Generally going out with a pair of snips and cutting it, and you'll see a knuckle. You'll see the tomato will be growing, and you'll have this big knuckle right here. And that's where the abscission point is created when the fruit falls. I like to cut above that, because if the plants design this escape pod to jettison, basically, I'm going to cut it above that to retain the most water I can. And it looks nice to cut branches and have branches of tomatoes on the counter, but all those branches are just leaching water into the air and drying the tomato out. So cut them off there. And the tomatoes I brought, some are 3 days old I picked, and some are picked today. So you'll feel the difference. This one's 3 days old, it's soft. And that'll give you an idea of how long they can stay on the counter. It might dictate the varieties you grow or the ways that you use them.
So legit, when you go to the grocery store and they have those vines connected to 3, 4, whatever tomatoes, it's essentially bullshit.
Well, they were also picked probably a week, maybe 10 days ahead of time from ripeness to survive the shipping and handling.
So it does kind of help them out.
It helps them out because they're cutting them so early.
Got it. Okay.
And it's got that aesthetic, that Sicilian, let's make some pasta.
Yeah. Not good.
Storing and preserving, you can dry them. I prefer canning. Roast them in the oven until the skin starts to get wrinkly, and I just leave them. I just don't even take them out. I just turn the oven off. And then about an hour after they cool, the peel comes right off, and you can process them. Sometimes I put them straight into a jar and freeze them. Sometimes I'll can them up to temperature.
Why remove the skin?
When you cook with them, that skin often curls up into the meal, and it's just an aesthetic. Sometimes I don't like the way it looks, sticks in your teeth, and on
Does it have flavor?
Yeah.
Are you missing flavor if you remove the skin?
No, well, you're taking that flavor, that skin out, and so you can make a tomato skin powder with that after you're done. There's a couple recipes on there.
Yeah, you can dehydrate it, freeze dry it, the whole shit.
Add it to stocks and soups in the fall and the winter. It's perfect.
Depends on how many tools you got.
A chest freezer is great. They're pretty inexpensive. It's about the height of this table. It's about this big. And they're pretty energy efficient. And freezing a lot of tomatoes is a good way to retain them throughout the season. Yeah, we can cover most of this in the kind of already. Salsas, sauces, salads, roasted. We talked about that. Trying to keep the time going here. All right. Well, that was the tomato portion.